Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of Beyond the Basics on Demand. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you the gear that I personally use, explore the gear that we'll be using in the field, and we'll do a refresh of how to use your camera in manual mode. So let's not waste any time and dive right in. When it comes to gear, this is my workhorse, the Canon EOS R5. It's versatile and packs a punch in terms of image quality. The work I've produced over the past 3 years have mostly been shot on this R5 right here. Along with this, I use a range of lenses depending on what the situation calls for. I use my Canon RF 15-35mm f2.8 for wide-angle shots, the RF 7200 f4 for medium zoom, and the RF 100-500 for those times when I need a little bit more reach. As you may have noticed, all of my lenses are RF lenses. When the RF system was introduced, it was clear where the industry was headed. The selection of new lenses available was also enticing, especially glass like the 7200 f4 right here. With the RF glass having increased optical quality, faster autofocus speed, enhanced image stabilization, and coming in at a smaller size, it was a no-brainer to trade in my EF glass for the new and improved RF system. These are my go-to equipment that I've acquired over the years, and they serve different purposes depending on the landscape and conditions I'm shooting in. For this course, I'll be using both my go-to camera and the EOS R8. The EOS R8 is a wonderful 24 megapixel full-frame camera, and those that have one know it's incredibly lightweight, making it the perfect camera to travel with without sacrificing image quality. With the EOS R8 being a full-frame camera, it has a larger sensor compared to an APS-C camera, which allows us to capture better images in low-light situations like we will be doing tonight. We will take full advantage of a wide-angle lens without having a crop. Having a camera that takes incredible images is one part of the equation. Truth is, the camera is only as good as your ability to use it effectively. So my suggestion is to familiarize yourself with your camera. I'd say spend at least an hour or two with your camera manual. It sounds tedious, but it pays off massively when you're out in the field. I'm most known for my low-light work and astrophotography. For the most part, I always bring along with me a tripod. Having a tripod is near essential to capture ultra-sharp images in low-light conditions. Unless you can hold absolutely still for an extended period of time, get a tripod. There are many tripod options out there in the market. Just go with one that will keep your camera sturdy in windy conditions and has adequate height. We'll also bring along some artificial lighting to potentially play with, adding another layer of depth to our image. We'll talk about that in the next episode. Now that we've talked about the gear that we'll be bringing with us, let's go over the 3 components that make up the exposure of an image, also known as the exposure triangle. Let's do a quick refresh, as understanding shutter speed, aperture, and ISO will empower you to master manual mode. Let's start with shutter speed. Look at these 2 photos. The first one shows water flowing smoothly, almost like a painting, while the second freezes the water droplets in midair. Both were achieved by manipulating shutter speed. A fast shutter speed, like 1/1000th of a second, will freeze motion, making each frame a split-second snapshot. This is great for capturing fast-moving subjects. On the other hand, a slow shutter speed, like 1 or 2 seconds, blurs motion. This can be useful for capturing flowing water or star trails in the night sky. But remember, slow shutter speeds almost always require a tripod to avoid camera shake. In this course, we'll be adjusting our shutter speed a lot to get the desired look and exposure we want for our image. Keep in mind that adjusting the shutter speed also affects your exposure. A faster shutter speed decreases the exposure, while a slow shutter speed increases the exposure. Next, we have aperture, which is all about controlling the amount of light that enters through the lens. But it's not just about light, it's also about depth of field. When you have a lower f number, like f2.8, the aperture opens up, allowing more light in. This also creates a shallower depth of field, blurring the background and bringing emphasis to your subject. A higher f number, like f22, narrows the aperture, allowing less light but achieving a deeper depth of field. This is your go-to for landscapes when you want everything from the foreground to the background to be in focus. To keep it simple, aperture affects how much of the scene is in focus. It also affects the exposure. A lower f number increases the exposure, while a higher f number decreases the exposure. Finally, let's discuss ISO. It determines how sensitive your camera's sensor will be to light. The higher the ISO value, the more sensitive the sensor is to light, making the image more exposed. Low ISO values like 100 or 200 are ideal for bright conditions and produce cleaner, crisper images. But what if you're in a low light setting? You can crank up the ISO to a higher value, but beware, the higher you go, the more noise you'll introduce into your shots. Thankfully, newer cameras such as the EOS R8 can shoot at high ISO without introducing noticeable noise, so don't be afraid to go higher on the R8. There are also adjustments you can make in post-processing or other advanced techniques that can be used to reduce noise. These three elements, shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, are like the ingredients in a recipe. Each affects the other, and it's your job to balance them perfectly to achieve your vision. So when should you use manual over aperture or shutter priority? Aperture priority is great for landscapes and portraits when depth of field is key, and shutter priority is your friend when you're capturing motion like wildlife or sports. However, manual mode gives you full control, especially when lighting is complex or if you're chasing a specific vision. Learning how to shoot manual gives you complete mastery, allowing you to create the photo exactly the way you envision it. That's a wrap for episode 2. Remember, the best camera is the one you know how to use. Spend time mastering your gear and understanding the exposure triangle, and you'll be well on your way to capturing those breathtaking shots.